Bitcoin's going to millions of dollars.
It's
But
great.
also think of it like you're acquiring a percentage of future assets, right? And so one Bitcoin, right now, one Bitcoin,
Yep.
21 million Bitcoin, decade or two away, there'll be 10 billion
Mhm.
people. That is about 500 human beings per Bitcoin. So if you could buy one Bitcoin, that is equivalent to having most likely way more than enough purchasing power of 500 people in the far future. Hello, everyone. Hope you're having a wonderful day, wherever you are, whenever in the future you are. My name's Luke Broyles. You probably know who I am, but here we have Mike Hatch. Mike is a friend of mine. We've known each other at least a year and a half now. I'm not quite sure, Mike. Sorry. But
I think so. Yeah, no, that's okay.
Yeah, we've known each other a good while, and it's been great. We've been to events together. We have been at many dinners together, Bitcoin events together, Christian events together. Mike is a fellow Christian, as myself, and today's video, we're going to be talking about Bitcoin as plumbing. Bitcoin as plumbing for the world monetary system.
Plumbing.
Yeah,
Okay,
plumbing for the world monetary system, and how Bitcoin is better, fair, honest measures. We're going to probably talk about why Bitcoin is better for churches and better for treasuries for churches, companies. Hopefully this will be used to everyone, but hopefully especially people that are trying to help their pastor, their elders, or their friends, whomever, begin adopting Bitcoin as a treasury asset. So we're going to give the case for that, as well as a bit of explanation from the faith perspective of why we like Bitcoin. But
yeah. Now, real quick, Luke, before you go on, though, I want to make sure that we're on the same page. I did say plumb line.
Yeah.
As in a construction.
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure we're on the. Okay,
plumb line for construction and plumbing as for
they use it in plumbing. Absolutely.
Everything. Yeah. So great. Well, also, Mike,
that's right.
I forgot to mention. Also, you are on the advisory board for the nonprofit 501c3 organization. Bitcoin is better. So, Mike, let's introduce yourself.
Yes.
Tell us about yourself and tell us why Bitcoin is plumbing horizontally for the world and a plumb line vertically for the world. Tell us all about yourself and your story of coming to Bitcoin.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Luke, man. It's good. It's really good to be with you, brother. This is, I'm excited for this opportunity to share with you and have this conversation, man. So yeah, I have to go back to, in terms of my story. So, well, a little background on me first. So I've been in ministry like my whole life. So starting right out of college, went on staff with Young Life. Young Life is a Christian outreach to high school kids, served as an area director in Northwest suburban Chicago for about 9 years. And then from there, left Chicago around 2013, moved back to Pittsburgh. My wife and I are our hometown with our 4-year-old son. We have one. He's now 15 now. And so we moved back to Pittsburgh, where I became a men's pastor at a church in the North Hills of Pittsburgh. Served in that role for about a little over 7.5 years. And then spent a little bit of time in some business development stuff with a men's discipleship ministry before I took on my current role as a chapter president and executive coach for Truth at Work, which is a marketplace ministry where I facilitate executive peer advisory groups and just helping businesses, Christian business owners, Christian business leaders build their business on biblical principles. And so that's been my calling actually for a while now. So I'm excited to finally be in that spot and be doing this. So, and my Bitcoin kind of story in some sense starts back in 2007, 2008 during the global financial crisis. And we were living in Chicago. And so mortgages went nuts out in Chicago, of course, big city. It's funny because when I talked to people in Pittsburgh around that time, they said, wait, what mortgage crisis? We're in a bubble over here. We don't even notice it. So there's a small enough market here in Pittsburgh that it didn't have a huge impact. But in Chicago, where we were living at that time, man, we had friends who walked away from their houses, took the hit on their credit, literally just walked out and stopped paying their mortgage. I mean, it was a crazy time. And so I just got really curious. I didn't understand how banks would fail. And on top of that, how they would get bailed out exactly. And nor did I understand what that meant. And I started hearing things about the Federal Reserve, wasn't sure who they were. and then started just get trickling in like little pieces here and there to indicate maybe how money is made. And really, that really piqued my interest because I just did not understand any of that. I had grown up kind of in the Dave Ramsey style of just, pay off debt, live frugally, put your money into a, what do you call it?
Mutual fund?
Into the stock market, basically. Mutual fund. Yes. Thank you. Which I did that, had a matching 401k with Young Life, which was really nice. And just kind of did what I was told to do, basically. And all this new information was I was learning a lot about the economy, reading books about the economy and economics. Most of it was secular in nature, and I kind of had to then go to the Bible and reconcile these things I was learning and try to understand what was going on. It wasn't until eventually I found some Christian authors who wrote about economics from a biblical Christian worldview. But anyway, I just got really curious during that time. And then as a pastor at Orchard Hill Church, the Church of the North Hills there where I served, I started meeting a lot of Christian business owners who are men and learning a little bit more from them as well. And as I began to understand that our current monetary system and economic system was very broken and corrupt, something began to pop up for me in Scripture as I read it, and that was that we're called to, I guess, what has been termed before like a secondary sovereignty. I believe in the podcast Bitcoin in the Bible, they term it that way. And so you've got the umbrella of God's sovereignty, and then we have this secondary sovereignty we've been granted by God to take dominion over the earth, to create, be fruitful, and multiply. And I kind of came to some conviction myself that I had not laid claim to that call or taken it seriously, and was way more consumer minded versus producer minded than I had expected, and just woke up. In a sense, it was one of those moments where you kind of get detached from the matrix and understand, wait, holy cow, nothing is what it seems. So then, but what I saw in Scripture over and over was how God calls us to be productive and to accept responsibility for our own financial future. And so I started to learn more about the what do you call it? The nefarious nature, I guess you could call it, of the stock market and the monetary system, and eventually decided to pull my money out of the stock market just out of conviction that it was displeasing to the Lord. And now I'm a pastor at this point in time, and I'm also watching as these other business leaders who are Christians and the impact, the very redemptive impact they were having in the community, which kind of smashed some of my preconceptions before, where I had this kind of false dichotomy in my mind, especially being in ministry my whole life, that you've got the corporate world, which is on one hand, which is the evil, like sinful place where you have to go, as a necessary evil to produce an income, provide for your family, make money. But that's so that you can give to, on the other hand, the ministry church world where God's really working, right? And so you take it, you do what you have to do in the evils of the corporate world to give to ministry and church where God's really working, and that's how you make a difference. And suddenly that dichotomy was really smashed for me as I was meeting with these business owners and just learning how they had, it became clear to me that their business was their ministry. And suddenly that I'm thinking, oh my gosh, these things aren't as separate as I thought, and compartmentalized as I thought. And so, and again, convicted me about my own, like, what am I doing to produce value for others? And maybe I'm being too dependent on the state or the system. So anyway, eventually came to understand through Mike Maloney and goldsilver.com. I don't know if any of you have maybe heard that. Watch through his this Hidden Secrets of Money is what it's called. YouTube. Have you seen that?
Yes.
Luke, by any chance? Okay. All right. Yeah, that was a key moment for me, walking through that and really understanding the role that gold and silver, or honest weights and measures as I saw it, played in the economy. And that was cool. And so I became a gold bug, but I always felt like there's more. Okay. So I know I could produce value. Maybe it means I need to invest in a business. Maybe I need to start a business. Maybe I need to do something more productive than what I'm doing. And I know I'm in ministry and there's productivity there, but I really felt God calling me to more. And so then I started reading Gary North, who is a Christian economist, and I joined his online forum, and interesting. I was learning a lot there. He has some tremendous free books and articles to read for anybody who's looking to understand the broken monetary system better. And as I was reading through that, I was thinking, okay, this is terrible. All these things are terrible. What can we do to make an impact? What can we do to make a difference, basically? And I went onto the forum and I actually, asked in the forum, I'm like, is anybody doing anything to make a difference? How do we make a redemptive impact? And I was blown away because the response I got from the forum was basically, hey, the world chose to go the way they're going. You can't help them. They're gonna burn with everything else. You just need to protect yourself and your family. That's what you need to focus on. And it was deeply unsatisfactory to me. I just felt like, wait a second, what, really? Like, we're just gonna do everything we can to put a bubble around ourselves and our families. And I understand we need to protect I own gold and silver. I'm protected. I get it. But what can I do to make a positive impact? And there was no indication of that. So then a friend of mine and I, he's in a business executive coach, investor, he and I started a podcast called Blue Collar Money, Theories of Middle Class Investing, where we were helping the blue collar middle class basically accept responsibility for their own financial future. And one of the things, and what I didn't know then was that we started talking about all the different principles and values that are already embodied in the Bitcoin community. I didn't know it at the time, though. So we talked a lot about self-sovereignty, not just investing in the stock market, but looking closer around you. Are there businesses locally you could invest in? We would have people on talk about the ways that they were having a redemptive impact locally through investing and things like that. And that was great. And then we had Jimmy Song on the podcast. I was connected to him, and he came on and got to interview him. And man, my mind was blown. So I got the book first. Thank God for Bitcoin, of course. Read that in preparation for the interview, and man, did it blow my mind. I mean, of course, everything was in alignment with what I had been studying previously up to that. But man, did it I loved how they brought in scripture and a biblical perspective on monetary history and the corruption of money and all that. And it just really spoke to me. And so I felt like, man, Jimmy and I are on the same page here. So had him on the show, had a great conversation. He really, really opened our eyes to Bitcoin. And we both were, my co-host and I were very much like, okay, we need to learn more about this, basically. And so I began to learn more about it, but like many people, fell into the false assumption that Bitcoin is just the first of many cryptocurrencies. And there's going to be others that come along. Maybe Bitcoin's the AOL, and who's the Facebook and the Google that we need to make sure we find. So got distracted with other cryptocurrencies. And it's so funny because I remember Jimmy was very gracious. We would message on LinkedIn often, and I would ask him like, "Hey, what about Hedera Hashgraph? Have you heard about Hedera Hashgraph? Or what about this Lode coin? It's a gold silver backed, cryptocurrency. What about these? Like, these seem really." And Jimmy was very abrupt and and very like black and white, just saying, "No, it's decentralized. I don't have anything to do with it." And I was just blown away. I was all like, I don't want to say offended, but I was curious about why he would just dismiss it out of hand. Like, really? You wouldn't even investigate this? And so I went down that journey like so many other people do, right? And then eventually, let me think here. It took a while. I was following Hedera Hashgraph for a while. And it just became really, you couldn't utilize it. Like, it was all wrapped up like this carrot in front of you, kind of dangled out in front of you. Investors were coming in and they're claiming it's going to go to the moon and all this money we're going to make. But I couldn't even buy it. I couldn't access it unless I was an accredited investor and all this kind of stuff. So I got a little disillusioned. Yeah, right. You're seeing your eyebrows go up. Right.
Yeah.
All the signs were there. Absolutely. So, and that's actually where I kind of began to discover the difference between the two, a commodity and a security. But so finally, I kind of realized, okay, I think Bitcoin, and I think I took a really intentional effort also to read a lot during that. I think I was more passively learning as I went, but then I said, okay, I'm going to dive in deep on this and really study Bitcoin. Read a lot, watched a lot of documentaries, and my mind was blown. And I realized, okay, this is it. So I bought my first bit of Bitcoin in beginning of 22, and then went with a friend of mine, Todd Blummer, to the Bitcoin conference in 22 down in Miami. Went to the first Thank God for Bitcoin conference because Jimmy just reached out to me and said, hey, we're having this Christian Bitcoin conference. You should come check it out. And went down and once again just had my mind blown. And that really solidified it for me. And then after that, my wife and I sold a rental house, and we took a large portion of those proceeds and bought much more Bitcoin. And haven't looked back since, and am really, really grateful. And just the education continues. And what blows my mind is just the how biblical. Well, that might be the wrong way of saying it. I was going to say how biblical Bitcoin is, but in a sense it is. Like when you talk about an honest weight and measure, and you mentioned an article that I wrote. Let me see here, the title of it. Let me get in there. I got the Bitcoin, the monetary plumb line is what I called it. The idea basically that this is an honest or just weight and measure. And so the way I describe it now is from a biblical perspective, aside from just the inherent elemental characteristics of gold, Bitcoin is the only just weight and measure that I know of, monetary technology that abides by those standards biblically. And so it's so much more than just an investment. It's so much more than just even money. It is like so many have said, it's hope. It's a way out. It's a way to create a parallel economy for those who are marginalized and most vulnerable. And man, that's where God's heart is in those is with those people. So, and that's probably what I'm most excited about. I'm most excited about what I call the redemptive utility of Bitcoin. The potential it has to be the use cases. We haven't even discovered all of them yet, but some of the ones you're seeing already are just unbelievably redemptive. So, so that's a little bit about my backstory, my Bitcoin story. And now I just started a podcast, Redemptive Economics, here in Pittsburgh, and trying to highlight local business owners and business leaders who are making a redemptive impact through their business. And in the meantime, I get to also talk about Bitcoin because Bitcoin is the most redemptive technology. Yeah. It's in a sense, I guess I can say this, in a sense, it's like my Trojan horse to talk about Bitcoin. The podcast is here, but it's been really fun because there's a few other really influential business leaders here in Pittsburgh who are all in on Bitcoin, and it's been exciting to have them on and to talk about these things. And all sorts of cool stuff is happening here in the Pittsburgh region when it comes to Bitcoin. There's a bright orange future for us here in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, there's a lot there. I'd love for you to expand on Bitcoin as a plumb line. I think that would be one people find interesting. Other people have called Bitcoin like a meter stick, that Bitcoin is like a perfect meter stick. Others have called it a perfect weight and measure, like you described it. Others have called it, like I joked about earlier, the plumbing of the world. People have compared it to the wheel. People have compared it, or I like to compare it to that of a circle, even more than a wheel. People compare it to a lot of those things. But I think the problem, Mike, is that some people watching, maybe that are newer or maybe that are trying to wrap their head around this, may not get why you're saying that, right? So, okay, we're hearing, Mike, that you're saying Bitcoin is better for the world, that Bitcoin is more redemptive, that Bitcoin is better for people. But Mike, the problem is that the current system is corrupt. We agree on that. I get that.
Mm-hmm.
What someone watching may not get is they might say, Mike, if the current system is corrupt, why wouldn't we focus on fixing that instead of going to this new other thing that nobody uses? And even if that other thing was adopted, why wouldn't that also be corrupted, right? I mean, yeah, sure, we could say the dollar is corrupted, not redemptive, etc. But the Romans were corrupt, the
Mm-hmm.
French were corrupt, the Portuguese, the British, the Dutch, the Chinese, the Turks, right? All of them were corrupt. And so before we get back to explaining why Bitcoin is a plumb line or the wheel or plumbing or meter stick or whatever else,
Yeah.
why
Mm-hmm.
is Bitcoin different? You're saying you figured out Bitcoin is different than all these things. Like, can you just break it down from whether it's a Christian perspective, church perspective, whatever? Like, what would
Yeah.
be your response to somebody that is trying to understand but would have that question? Why don't we just focus on reducing corruption in the current system instead of the new system? And in the new system, how do we know there's not going to be just as much corruption in that new system?
Oh, that's a great question. So let's start with the current system and why I believe we need to opt out of the current system. You know, we are living, well, especially here in the United States, we are living in I would describe it with the Bible calls Babylon, which is kind of a metaphor for the anti-Christian, anti-Christ kind of influence in the world. Usually, it's a nation of some sort that's been the most powerful nation during that time, which is why the United States would qualify today as being a Babylon, if you will. And so in Revelation chapter 18, it actually talks about the fact that Babylon is a harlot, and that the sins are stacked up, and it goes into actually some really interesting economic um, descriptions of how corrupt Babylon has been, and then it calls at some point, it calls God's people out, and an angel comes down in that chapter and actually says, "Come out of her, my people, come out of her. Otherwise, you will be participating in the sins of Babylon and suffer the consequences of the sins of Babylon." And so, I would say, first of all, bottom line, I think we are called as Christians um, to come out of her in that sense, and to not participate in the corrupt nature that Babylon is inherent with Babylon. Now, unfortunately, we've grown up in this system, and we don't know anything different, and we've assumed that those who've taught us about our financial monetary system, um, they were probably just taught as well, the same way we were, and it just kind of went from one person to another. And I think as Christians, we need to wake up and understand the roles that we are playing, and the ways that we are complicit in Babylon's sin. So, for example, this is a debt-based monetary system where money is created through debt. When you go to the bank and you get a mortgage, a car loan, a business loan, whatever it is, that money didn't exist before you got that loan. That money was keyed in through a computer digitally. The great Jerome Powell, Fed chair, confirmed this in a 60 Minutes interview. But you can go into most Federal Reserve website there and find out for yourself that's what happens. And so basically, we know that when a currency is inflated like that, it steals value from everybody else's dollar. And so in doing that, we are participating in that sin of what the Bible would describe as unjust weights and measures. Now, I could go into some detail about that. I'll suffice it to say, and you can let me know, Luke, if I should get more detailed, but basically, for the currency of any nation to be arbitrarily inflated or deflated by an elite few who oversee everything, like the Federal Reserve and our banking cartel, that is unjust weights and measures, because they make all the decisions, and when currency is created, it has to be there has to be a price that is paid for that currency. In a sense, work has to be done to really validate money, and unfortunately, when they create money out of thin air, ex nihilo, or by fiat, they're taking the place of God, first of all, and they're assuming they can create out of nowhere. They can't. Mm-hmm. That value comes and is stolen from everybody else's dollars that they have. So we participate as Christians in this corrupt system, sadly, and that's been a heavy burden for me to think about, because I'm the biggest would you say, hypocrite. My hands are bloody. I'm literally sitting in a house that I got a mortgage for, and we got that mortgage, and money was created for the mortgage for us to buy this house. So literally, I'm guilty of stealing value, of fraud. I'm guilty of defrauding everybody else who holds dollars in order to buy my house. That's a hard pill to swallow. Right now, my emphasis is trying to produce as much value as possible, in a sense, to make up for that, but it doesn't. And at some point, we're going to have to pay the piper. We're going to have to, as a family, decide what we're going to do next. As far as, do we sell it? Do we downsize? We may have to do something else. But I say that just to kind of let people know that I'm currently in the struggle right now. And so for people who might hear these things that we're playing, like when I say we're complicit in Babylon's sin, I know a lot of Christians might get really defensive and say, whoa, wait a second. That's not me. That's not my heart. I'm not trying to steal money. I'm just trying to work hard and do what I'm told. Mm-hmm. And I get it. Yeah. I get it. And we all have to start where we are to figure out what to do next. So basically, I would say we need to come out of her, in a sense. We need to stop participating in the fraud ourselves. And I said this in my last podcast. I think, imagine what would happen if, as Christians, we pulled out and just refused to utilize debt, inflationary debt again. What if we, in some ways, banded together and resourced each other, and were able to recognize the true value, the true price of capital, in a sense? Because now, when you invest in something, or you offer someone a loan or something, there's opportunity cost there. When you're creating money out of thin air, there's no opportunity cost for you, the person who's creating. There is for everybody else who suffers the loss of the value of the dollar. So I just that would be an amazing thing if we as Christians were to come out of her, as Revelation calls us to, and to stop participating. And so Bitcoin gives us this opportunity, being an honest weight and measure, a just weight and measure, to opt out of that current system and utilize a money that is honest and fair and transparent, permissionless. I can throw out all the different buzzword descriptions, if you will. I'm sorry. Yeah. All the words, right. I should throw out all the words, but it's an incredible opportunity for us to develop these parallel economies using Bitcoin. And it's already, you're seeing this already around the world, where these people who've been under the thumb of oppression in third world countries are adopting Bitcoin much quicker than many of us here in our first world comfortable America, where we are the dollar hegemony, top of the heap. It's not surprising that Americans have a hard time seeing the value in it because of that, unfortunately. But we're seeing it offering a way out and hope for people who've been marginalized by corrupt currencies around the world. So I think there would be tremendous blessing. I think God would use this in incredible ways if we were to pull out. So I guess that, in answer to your question, that's why I would say we need to exit that system and move to Bitcoin. Yeah. Okay. Does that make sense? Let me stop there for a minute.
I mean, I think it makes sense. Hopefully people following along or watching. The thing I would add to that is that I think to a certain degree, we can't escape all of the sin of the world. We can't escape all the corruption in the world, right? We can't ever do that, right? I don't think we're saying that. I don't think you're saying that. But I think what you are saying is that when the option presents itself to escape Babylon, to fund and direct more energy towards a more biblical and godly direction than when it's not, I think it is the obligation of Christians to do that where it's possible, right? And so I guess maybe to give a bit more specific example, because some people may not follow, how is your mortgage hurting people? So So when America prints dollars and we distribute those dollars to the rest of the world, we benefit at their expense. It's a zero-sum game, right? If I build a business and somebody participates in that business, that is wealth creation. More wealth was created. But it's an accounting trick to move currency units from point A to point B, or even more dramatically, it's an accounting trick to create new currency units and distribute them to your preferred people. And so when the government in America, via banks, creates new political currency units and grants them towards American home buyers like you and myself, they are inherently not granting those political currency units towards people outside the United States, meaning that people like ourselves, right, myself, get a larger percentage of the share, right? If I have 100 currency units, Mike has 100 currency units, and some person in Congo or in Guatemala or wherever else in the world has 100 currency units, and then the government gives me newly created currency units via a bank, let's say another 100 for me, another 100 for you, we've just expanded the monetary supply from 300 units total to now I got 200, you have 200, and they have 100. So that other person, the person outside that system, farther away from us, instead of having a third of the wealth, now they have a fifth of the wealth, right? And this is what we see even within America, right? In America, we see the middle class getting gutted because the exact same thing is happening within America, right? Because even though like you and I get the houses, we get the mortgages, and people outside the U.S. don't get those.
Yeah.
People within America get different benefits that you and I don't get, right? People on Wall Street, people in charge of the banks, they get all the printed money that we don't get. So essentially it becomes this zero-sum game where we are benefiting at the expense of people lower, quote unquote, lower than us. Really, the better word is probably farther away from Washington, D.C. than us, right? And it just goes up and up inversely too. Right. So I think that's probably important to clarify. And I guess...
It's great. And yeah, when we get the money, in a sense, we get those dollars, we're, as you say, closer to DC or closer to the money printer. So we get those dollars early and get to enjoy closer to the full value of those dollars. Right. But as those dollars matriculate through the economy, especially those who are poor, they get way less valuable.
I think a good material example would be that of 2020, right? So everyone watching this remembers 2020, unless you were in a coma. But I think 2020 is probably a very real example, right? Pretty much everyone watching this show in America got some sort of stimulus check. Maybe it was $600, $1,200, whatever it was for you. It's irrelevant. You know, some people watching this maybe got millions of dollars because they had some sort of PPP loan or whatever. And I guess to expand on what you were saying and answer my earlier question, why can we not fix the corruption within the current system, is because everybody wants that, right? Everybody needs that to survive, right? Who is not going to take the stimulus check? Who is not going to take a mortgage to buy the house? You have to have the mortgage to buy the house. You have to take the stimulus check because as the dollar is worth less, you increasingly need the handouts from the government. But the problem is these things have a very tangible human cost, okay? Millions of people starved as a result of the lockdowns of 2020, right? Roughly as many people died from starvation and economic instability, in particular in the developing world, that they did to the disease that caused 2020, right? And so this is, this is the big crisis, is that the government intervention and centralization surrounding the disease, maybe it reduced deaths with the disease, maybe it didn't, but even if it did, assuming it did, the reality is that nothing is free, and shutting down here at home and diluting the currency to fund that shutdown accelerated different kinds of death in different parts of the world. And unfortunately, people in Congo or people in Thailand or people in Nigeria or in Venezuela, people outside America don't get to vote in America's system. And so to, again, that earlier question, the reason why we cannot direct the current political system towards a more redemptive route ultimately is because human beings are in charge of the current political currency paradigm. And human beings, if you're a Christian, you believe all humans are depraved, all humans are sin, all humans need a savior, etc. And so if you have any technological system where human beings are in charge of said system, it is an eventual inevitably a matter of time that one group of those humans, or a human or whomever in charge of the system, is going to either themselves become corrupt or become corrupt as a function of everyone else, right? That the Jerome Powell is not
Yep.
uniquely evil. He is simply doing what everybody wants him to do, right? Everyone in America wants him to
Yep.
keep. Nobody wants house prices to go down. Nobody wants these things to go down. In fact, even people
Yep.
outside the United States
Yep.
doesn't want the United States to go down, right? And so this is the fundamental problem: is that we have a political problem of political corruption because human beings are corrupt, and so
Mm-hmm.
we can't solve the political problem with a political solution because you can't fix the human heart. And so when I look at that problem, the only
Amen.
two
Yep.
solutions are if we could somehow become Christ, if we somehow could make sure everyone in the world never sins again. That's option A, which eventually will happen, right? But we can't initiate that. That's not a practical
Yep.
tool, right?
Yep.
Some people would say we do, but I guess they wouldn't follow Jesus. And now option B is then some sort of technological solution that at this time, this side of death, on this side of forever, circumnavigates the need for human beings to be in charge of that political solution. So anyway, I hope I expanded on that well, but
well, no, I love that point, Luke. I love that because that's one of the things that eventually got me to give up on my gold and silver dream. Yeah. Because gold and silver, like, gold, we'll just stick with gold. So the only way that gold works as money is if you've got people, sinful, broken, fallen people who are at the core of organizing it,
defending it,
keeping track of it, storing it, defending it. It's a great point. Yeah, defending it. That's exactly right. Which is, man, we have a history full of wars
and
that have been fought for.
Yeah, and if I could add to that real quick, the problem is that it's a feedback of incentive, right? The if you have a trusted person who's a really good guy, really solid guy, let's say me, right? Let's say someone trusts me and they give me their gold, I keep their gold for them, right? The problem is that the larger that honeypot grows, the more guns I need. Okay, the more guns I need to protect this gold against the bad guys, right? And so now I have more guns to protect more and more gold, but the problem is that incentive grows and grows and grows because I'm a single point of failure for controlling everybody's gold, and I've got more guns in the process. Well, now suddenly I'm the guy in charge, and if I decide to go corrupt, now I transition from the trusted person with all the power to the person exerting the power, and vice versa. So the more successful a bank, a country, or a country's currency is, the more valuable it becomes. The more value people give it, inherently, the greater the honeypot, and eventually the greater the temptation. And the greater the temptation, the more effort evil forces are going to be willing to work within that person and externally to then take control of the honeypot. So anyway,
absolutely, that's exactly right. And as Christian worldview, we are sinful and broken, so we are predisposed to that. We are not meant to be trusted with that kind of power. Right. What's the saying? Something like ultimate power corrupts ultimately, or something like that.
Yeah.
Absolute power. Right. Exactly. And man, you see it go to people's heads all the time. Right. We are way more sinful than we give ourselves credit for. So so this is a system. Bitcoin is a system that stands outside of that, based on technology. That I don't know if you get into that, but
because then the question is for the person watching us. They would say, "Okay, Luke, Mike, okay, let's say we can't fix that current system. What prevents this Japanese guy, Satoshi Nakamoto? What prevents him from being the guy in control? Right? Why can't Satoshi just be the new Jerome Powell or the new guy with all the gold? Right? Like." Do you want to take a stab at that, Mike? Why is Bitcoin? We've established why you can't fix a political system from within a political system. Why is Bitcoin not just a different political system that's been reframed?
Well, you'd have to find Satoshi first. Good luck finding Satoshi. That's first of all. He's done a really good job of covering his tracks, or she, or whoever they are. So that's not a possibility. But so that's a great question. So I think the nature of the Bitcoin protocol, if you will, is such that it really doesn't need any authority because it is it's of course decentralized You and I guess, know what that means. But if we're talking to someone new, that would mean that basically it's the first. How do I say? I heard this said once, and I think this is a great way of describing it. It is the first decentralized database. I've heard it described that way before. If you think about a database, I've got a can of water here, that I drank. A database is a central location that everybody gets to plug into to gain access to the information within that database. You know what I mean? So now, but it's centralized, and which makes it very susceptible to being to be messed with or to be hacked or whatever, right? Because it's one central location. So throw this out. Bitcoin is a decentralized database in that sense. I don't even know where to begin in a sense to kind of understand that, but the idea is that the different nodes or computers on the network, mining nodes and computers that are running the Bitcoin, what do you call it? The Bitcoin. Oh my gosh, why am I? The word is escape. Thank you. They all have copies simultaneously of the database and exists on the network on each one of those nodes separately, which makes it impossible to hack. I mean, at this point, it's been going for 15 years and nobody's hacked it. The government has gone after it. And as long as it's efficiently, or sufficiently decentralized like that, it's going to be impossible to hack. And then there's protocol built into the network that all of those nodes that are decentrally located abide by and follow those rules as well. And so in order to participate in the protocol, you have to abide by the rules. So you have to opt in to it in order to abide by it. Otherwise, you don't opt in, you opt out, right? Very similar to our Christian faith. There is a protocol that God has laid out for us to live by, for him to be the Lord of our life. And you're either in or you're out. You opt in or you don't, and you're not part of it. And if you opt in, then there's definitely a protocol or rules that you abide by within that structure. I know that's kind of
there's a parallel.
Maybe that's a little sacrilegious, but yeah, there's parallel there. Yeah. So there's no need for a central authority, which removes it's all math and technology that removes the human factor in it. That a human doesn't need to, and that just doesn't need to, can't actually come in and change the rules in any way or make new rules, however you want to put it. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. And I think we could probably get deep in the weeds with the tech probably a while, which I've made lots of other videos about that.
Yeah.
There's lots of videos. I encourage people to learn about that. But the simple test to validate that, right? Because even if someone spends 10 hours learning about that, how can you validate it, right? The easy way to validate it is that Bitcoin is open source code. It's open source code that's been out since 2009, and nobody has been able to hack it. And it's worth over $1 trillion today. And so, if somebody took, let's say somebody took $1 trillion of diamonds and they put it in Times Square, how long until it would be gone? Probably pretty quick, right? $1 trillion of cars, and they spread it all across Wyoming, right? It'll be gone in 15 years, right? If you took $1 trillion of anything and put it anywhere in the world, no matter what kind of asset it is, portable, not portable, whatever, people would find a way to get it.
Someone's going to find a way to get to
it. And so even worse, if it was digital, accessible by anyone with an internet connection, the validation for what all the Bitcoin people say that, nobody can stop it, nobody can stop it, nobody can stop it. The common man, let's say, or the layman's terms way to validate what they're saying is just that fact that it's been around for a decade and a half. Right now it's worth over $1 trillion. If I knew how to hack Bitcoin, I could be wildly well. I could be the richest person in the world if I hacked it, right? And I looked at it, I can't hack it. Michael Saylor's looked at it, he doesn't know how to hack it, right? Satoshi himself doesn't know how to hack it, right? Nobody has been able to do that, right? If you had a honeypot with any other asset in the world, people will take it, right? And this is the beauty of Bitcoin, that, again, if you have a technological system that can be exploited by human beings, it will be exploited. And if you believe that, because you understand that the entire world is not perfect, let alone any of the world, then you understand
Mm-hmm.
that
Yep.
Bitcoin's continued survival in of itself is proof of its own success.
Absolutely. And this is a key piece here, Luke, too. So I want to make this point because it was really important to me in my journey of understanding Bitcoin. And that is the difference between it being decentralized and centralized. So there's thousands and thousands of cryptocurrencies out there that have been developed. And I was distracted one after another, by several of them, thinking they were a great idea. And but here's the here's the question you need to ask yourself as you're looking at these cryptocurrencies: who is it that started it? Who is it that wrote the code? Who is it that is governing that? Who is it that started it? Is there a company? Is there a governing body of some sort? Then it's not decentralized, and therefore it's still susceptible to human sinful whims to control it. And you see that with Ethereum. Like Ethereum, it's been inflated like crazy. They changed the protocol from being a proof of work to a proof of stake
6 times.
Six times.
It might be 7, but at least 6 times they've changed the monetary policy of Ethereum. And more importantly, they always can again. Mm-hmm.
Yep, absolutely, because they're in charge. That is not decentralized. Like they will say it's decentralized till they're blue in the face, but there's someone who is in charge of it, who is watching over it, who is marketing it, whatever you want to say. It's not decentralized. You cannot point to Bitcoin. Like, Satoshi left for a reason. I think he had some motives of wanting to avoid getting caught in a sense by the government. I think that's part of what their motives were. But I do think he had in mind that if this is going to continue, he can't. It's got to be owned by the network. It cannot be owned by a single person or governing body. So just a key piece to keep in mind. There's really, I don't know any other cryptocurrency that's decentralized at all.
Yeah, I mean, some might be able to argue that other digital currencies, tokens, etc., have some sort of value. I think some, most particular, specifically stable coins, have some degree of value, but all of them essentially are unregulated or quasi-regulated securities, right? Some of them you're investing in very, very speculative venture capital companies. Most of them are vaporware. A couple of them might be legitimate businesses. But again, the problem is that even if the business itself is legitimate, that doesn't necessarily mean that the people creating the tokens to represent that business you're buying are being truthful, right? Apple Computer is a legitimate company. Amazon's a legitimate company. The U.S. government is a legitimate country, but that doesn't mean the U.S. dollar is the best preserver of purchasing power, right? And so the first question is, is that other currency other than Bitcoin vaporware or not? It's almost certainly vaporware. The number two, if it's not vaporware and it's an actual attempting to be a genuine good faith business, is it actually being a profitable business? And then the third question is that even if it is a profitable business, am I going to make money on it? And then the fourth question, which dwarfs them all, is do you want to save your own purchasing power, your company's purchasing power, or your church's purchasing power in a company with a single point of failure, where even if all those other things are true, it's not vaporware, it's a legitimate good faith attempt at a business, and it's a successful business where also they're having a stable number of equity shares, tokens within the company. That's the big question. It still has a single point of failure. And so that's the beauty with Bitcoin, is that you don't need to think about any of those things with Bitcoin. It's not vaporware. It's not a company. It's not trying to be a company. It's just trying to be that honest weight and measure. So maybe now we can finally get back to full circle. Mike, why is Bitcoin the wheel, the meter stick, the plumbing, the plumb line, the architecture? Why is it so unique in that sense? That why is it the global standard, let's say?
My name is Luke, and I'm a board member as well as the director of content at the 501c3 nonprofit organization, Bitcoin is Better. The mission of Bitcoin is Better is to help the working class as well as people new to Bitcoin better understand Bitcoin. What is Bitcoin? How does it work? And why is it important to me and my family? If you find this conversation interesting and you want to learn more about Bitcoin, please go to the website Bitcoin is Better, where you can get hours of free educational resources about Bitcoin, as well as numerous articles about Bitcoin. Additionally, if you want to go even further and you're somebody that's new to Bitcoin or pretty curious about getting into Bitcoin, please fill out the application, the link of which is in the description below, where you can apply to join the show as a guest. Have a one-on-one discussion with somebody that can hopefully answer your questions about Bitcoin appropriately. And at the end of the conversation, you will get free Bitcoin as a thank you for your time, your interest, and engagement, and hopefully to propel you on your next steps in your Bitcoin journey. If you are not somebody that is new to Bitcoin, but you've been in Bitcoin a while, still liking and subscribing to this channel and sending these videos to your friends and people new to Bitcoin is something you can do to help the organization. And beyond that, please consider donating. Again, Bitcoin is Better is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Feel free to donate to us, and just a mere couple $100 donation will have a very lasting impact with lots of people new to Bitcoin that impacts many individuals and therefore many families. So please consider sharing this content with people that are new to Bitcoin in your network. Please consider donating so that Bitcoin could be passed on to new orange-pilled people right after a Bitcoin discussion with them. And additionally, beyond that, with the application, again, link in the description below, feel free to have people that you know in your network apply and join. And hopefully these kinds of conversations will be helpful to them as well as many, many viewers to come. Additionally, and finally, if you are new to Bitcoin or been in Bitcoin a while and you want specific support for yourself, one-on-one support, I'm happy to help you, whether it's buying Bitcoin for the first time, buying Bitcoin for the 100th time, taking self-custody, upgrading your Bitcoin tax and legal status, whatever the case. If you need help with Bitcoin, no matter your skill level and no matter how much you're interested in buying, please reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to help. So thank you for your time. Let's get back to the content. But we appreciate you engaging with this content. We appreciate you filling out the application to get free Bitcoin. We appreciate you checking out our free resources. And ultimately, if you feel called to donate to our mission and our cause to accelerate Bitcoin adoption for the working class and to the majority of the world population, which is yet to acquire their first Bitcoin. So thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so I was in Amos chapter 7, really stuck out to me as I was reading through it, and basically it's another what do you call it? Another a prophet of the Old Testament that is calling Israel out for their sin, and Amos, who's the obviously the author of Amos, says that he was being shown, the Lord was showing him Israel's sin, and then it says in verse 7 that he showed. Let me see. This is what he showed me. He said, the Lord was standing by a wall that had been built true to plumb, with a plumb line in his hand. And the Lord asked me, "What do you see, Amos?" "A plumb line," he replied. Then the Lord said, "Look, I am setting a plumb line among my people, Israel. I will spare them no longer." God used a plumb line to discriminate against his people Israel, who had been called to live by this standard as his chosen people. So God basically, so Jesus, this is really in a sense a theophany in a sense where this is Jesus actually standing there with a plumb line. And so real quick, I'm gonna grab. I have a plumb line here. Hold on one second. I should have grabbed it before. Be right back.
This show is sponsored by Plumb Lines. Plumb Lines everywhere. Love it. Thank you all for watching. This is a little quick side note to like and subscribe and share this video with your loved ones. So hopefully we can help more people understand Bitcoin. So anyway, are you back with your plumb line, Mike? Great.
I'm back
Welcome
with my
back.
plumb line.
People
So
liked and
I went to.
So they're ready to hear you explain this.
That was a really good idea to talk about that while I grab my plumb line. So this is a kind of a modern day plumb line that you might find at Lowe's or Home Depot. And so basically it's a string or a line here attached to a weight at the end. And the beautiful thing about this is that it utilizes the attributes of creation that God, the immutable attributes of creation that God established. Gravity, of course, exactly. You also can't have a stiff line. You have to have a very, a line this wouldn't work with kind of a metal pole kind of thing. It's got to be able to pull it completely straight. So all sorts of different engineering plays into this, but you hold the plumb line up and the weight comes down and it gives you a straight line like this. And this is plumb is what this ends up being, which is just a straight line. So when you're building a wall, you're building a house, building landscaping, things like that, they will use this and hang a plumb line like this, and they will build the wall so that it is set in place straight up and down. And this helps them to do so. So, but this is as simple as this is a technology. Okay. And Bitcoin is very similar in that Bitcoin is a technology that utilizes the immutable created laws of nature in a sense. I think Michael Saylor often says that it is it's a engineering solution basically to money. And so Bitcoin does a very similar thing by utilizing some of the natural created order that God imposed on us to abide by in order to be a just weight and measure. And so basically, as Jesus was standing there holding the plumb line, he's saying, I've set a plumb line. Now, ultimately, the ultimate plumb line is Christ himself. He is the ultimate plumb line. He's the one who has set the standard.
He's the plumb line within our heart.
Sorry.
Right? Yeah.
Absolutely. That's exactly right. Yeah. He's also in many other ways, he fulfilled the law, for example, and things like that. Right. So he is the ultimate standard. And so Bitcoin in many ways is analogous to the plumb line, because here we are in a world with a very corrupt economic system that is taking advantage of the most vulnerable and is exploitive in so many ways. And here this thing is created, an engineering solution, if you will, to money that has become a just weight and measure for us to be able to rely on and to be able to build onto in the future when it comes to future businesses and savings and all these kind of things that we look to plan for the future with. So it provides that for us. There are many other places in Scripture that God uses a plumb line actually as a metaphor. But yeah, so that's kind of the basic premise, if you will, that we are that Bitcoin acts very similarly to that. And I think in many ways, God, in his providence, because nothing happens in this life, as far as I'm concerned, without God's permission or through his provision in some way. So I see Bitcoin as a way of God providing something for us that allows for those who are oppressed to be able to opt out to something that is dependable and that is, in a sense, unchanging as it abides by God's immutable laws of nature. Yeah. So that's kind of the idea. There was more here too, though, but that's the basic gist of being a plumb line. And so, yeah, it becomes a monetary plumb. I'm just looking through my notes here to make sure there's nothing else I'd want to say on it. But
yeah, I think that's a good explanation. So essentially, Bitcoin is an algorithm. It's just math, and it's there's the monetary equation of this is how many units are within the system, and then there's all the other code that when people run computers that defends the security of that algorithm, right? And so basically, in the same way, a plumb line is used to measure a structure, or in the same way that a wheel or a circle is by a certain equation, really a number, that being a pi, right? 3.14159 or whatever, out to infinity, right? You can't recreate pi. You can't out innovate a new plumb line. Another example would be that of architects, right?
That's right.
An architect needs a consistent unit of measure to build their house, right? Maybe the meter stick, maybe some other form of measurement. Of course, then there's the plumbing example that you don't want the flow of water or sewage through your pipes to be constrained or expanded upon that. And so what all these metaphors have in common is that all of those systems would begin to deteriorate if you injected humans into it, right? If humans were in control of managing pi,
Mhm.
3.14, if we were in control of measuring that, we would inherently get it wrong,
Right.
and our circles would start to become squares or different kinds
Oh
of
yeah.
polygons.
All
right?
sorts of weird.
And
Yep.
and even
Yep.
if we did know how to perfectly recreate pi, the problem is that if I'm the
Yep.
emperor, and I'm trying to hire let's say I'm trying to hire somebody, emperor, CEO, whatever, it doesn't matter. If I'm trying to hire somebody to build me 100 chariots, all with their own wheels, and I
Mhm.
were to go to some contractor to do it for me, and under the contract it says 100 wheels, well, then the problem is that, well, if I'm the contractor and I can artificially manipulate the math behind a circle, and I can manipulate the material I need, then I can distort that, right? Or likewise, if I am a central planner of the length of measure, the meter stick, I can artificially make houses bigger or smaller by changing a unit of measure, right?
That's
And so
right.
we see the same thing
Yep.
with prices. When the person in
Yep.
control
Mhm.
of, we have a monetary system that represents all the economic purchasing power in the world. It's the index for productivity. And now I'm going to deflate or inflate the supply of those units.
Mhm.
Now we can artificially change prices. And because it's in our own
Yep.
self-interest to increase prices at the expense of someone else, just like the contractor wants to
Mhm.
shrink the size of a wheel so they need less material at their benefit at the expense of the person that hired them. It's the same thing here, that we can
Yep.
artificially force
Mhm.
prices up on all assets to benefit ourselves at the expense of others. And we can do that by changing the money supply. And so, Mike, what you're describing correctly
That's
is
right.
that Bitcoin is an algorithm where it has a different set of numbers. It's a different index representing the same thing.
Mhm.
And the number of units is irrelevant. The
Mhm.
thing that matters is that you can't move it. No matter if you go to war, no matter
Yep.
if you're a better coder, no matter if you have more money, we don't technically know how to increase the number of Bitcoin. Like we literally don't have the physics for it at this time. So anyway, hopefully
Yep.
that helps
And
connect the 2 points.
that's great. That's super helpful. Yes, that was great. Thank you, Luke, for that. And the other piece I would say is that money is very significant in God's eyes from a biblical perspective. I believe God cares very deeply about money, and now again, some people might say, "Well, that's sacrilegious." What do you mean? Money is just a tool for commerce. It's just a medium of exchange for goods and services. Like, we're not supposed to focus on money. You know, it's the root of all evil. So we're supposed
The
to not
love of
focus on
money
money,
is the root of
etc.
all evil.
Actually, the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil.
Yep.
Actually, anyway, but yeah, right. It has absolutely been one of the most mistranslated and misquoted scriptures, but it's become so subconscious to us, I think. And even as Christians, there's this sense, and I think that's where that false dichotomy came from for me between, the corporate world, the business world, and ministry world, because it was all about money. It's all about profit. So it must be evil, right? There's also a false dichotomy between profit and nonprofit. Oh, it's nonprofit, so it must be more virtuous. No, not at all, actually. They both need to be profitable to be able to run. Anyway, the point is, I think God cares deeply about money, and this is why. And I think Jordan Bush was the first person who said this, that I kind of latched onto this, and I've kind of taken it a little bit further now. I believe that we, as God's people, are His money. We are, and I'll just say it this way, and then I'll explain a little bit. But we are His, just as money is a store of value. We are God's store of value through time and space for the purpose of eternity. And so when you think about our value, first of all, if just as being created by God, we are image bearers of God. So there's value in that in and of itself. And I think most people would say people are the most valuable thing in this world. I think most people would say that, at least Christians for sure.
If they're correct, that's what they would say.
But it goes even as, yeah, yeah, right, exactly. If they're Christians, oh man, that's another level, because now you have deposited into you the Holy Spirit, the very presence of God in you, which he's going to preserve. God says he's going to preserve us for eternity. Nobody will pluck us out of his hand, per se. And back in Exodus 19, where Israel is getting set up to take the land of Canaan, and God is kind of laying things out for them, expectations. And what he says to them, if you obey my commands, he says, you will be my treasured possession. And this is what came up when I first heard Jordan at the first Bitcoin conference talk about when Jesus takes the coin, when he's questioned about whether they should pay taxes or not. And he takes the coin and he says, whose image is this? It's Caesar. We'll give to Caesar what's Caesar's and give to God what is God's. This other passage came up, and that is that we are God's treasured possession. Of course, in the New Testament, they use the same language. We are his holy priesthood, a treasured possession. That word treasured possession, this is so interesting. Dr. Walt Kaiser, who was a seminary professor with Gordon Conwell Seminary, I took a course through him, and he talks about that passage particularly. And it's so funny how God kind of teaches you things along, gives you pieces of the puzzle, and you don't realize how they fit in certain ways until later. He talks about treasured possession. This is how he describes it. Okay, he says a treasured possession was not like a house or land or something that can't be moved. Literally, it was a movable store of value, a movable treasure, basically. So it's a portable treasure. He didn't even, I don't know if he knew what he was describing, but what he was describing was money, right? Money is a portable store of value. It's a treasure that helps to store our life energy, or the energy. It represents energy that we've exerted to produce value. And so we are, in a sense, God's money. And you can see that also in different language when God says, you see this in Psalms especially, that we are his inheritance, which is really interesting because obviously God is also our inheritance. So there's this interesting theological thing at play here where we are God's inheritance, yet he is also our inheritance. And it's, obviously God placed his presence in us by virtue of the Holy Spirit. He preserves us. And so it's all God who's doing it. But we are God's treasure. We are his store of value. We are his money.
He describes us. He describes us as his children, and children are inheritance, right?
Absolute. That's right. Great. That's a great point too. Yeah. So God is using us as that store of value to transport that value, the presence of God, in a sense, and his influence through the kingdom here on earth, through us. And so that is why, in my mind, money is so important to God. Money is in a sense, a metaphor for the value that I believe God, that God represents himself. Is incalculable value, of course. And then also the value that he has placed in us as his people. And so I think it's a much deeper issue when we take advantage or exploit someone, when we defraud someone, when we steal from somebody. It's so much deeper and so much bigger a deal than I think most of us give credit to it. You're stealing someone's life force, their very value. We are, and in a sense, taking the place of God, deciding who's valued more than others, for example. And especially knowing that Christ paid the penalty he did for us to die on the cross, so that we could enjoy the presence of the Holy Spirit, so we could enjoy redemption, forgiveness of sins, a right relationship with God. He paid the ultimate price. That is the ultimate proof of work on the cross that Jesus accomplished for us on our behalf. And as a result of that, now we are that inheritance or money that he's using to preserve that value through time and space. So I think that's one of the reasons why God is very serious about money, why there's so much in Scripture, obviously explicitly about money, but also implicitly. But that's also why something like Bitcoin should be of such significance to us as the church, as pastors, as Christians, as ministry leaders, as missionaries. Man, there is no greater monetary technology that values human life the way God does, basically.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, a technology that, what is a technology that values human life worth in terms of a technology that does not value human life? Or what is or what is truth priced in terms of lies, or what is a perfect circle priced in terms of one with an angle, right? Like it's literally infinite, right? And so we haven't yet talked about how many dollars is Bitcoin going to, but this is ultimately why Bitcoin is going up. So Michael Saylor, I don't know if he's a Christian or not, but he has the famous line of saying Bitcoin's going up forever, Laura, and this is essentially what he's describing: is that Bitcoin is a sound, correct, stable technology, and all these other technologies are not. And I like the way you put it. Bitcoin preserves human life when other currencies are zero-sum games. So inherently, they only preserve human life by extinguishing human life elsewhere, or reallocating it around. So that is why Bitcoin is going up in terms of dollars. Is because yes, Bitcoin is a better solution, and more people are coming to it, but also the worldview at which you're looking at it from is also deteriorating.
Right.
And so then the question comes to me that hopefully people watching us should be asking themselves is that, okay, my family, my church, my company, my whomever, my network, right? We have been using in dollars. We've had a monopoly on dollars our whole life. We've had 100% allocation to dollars. We've never had Bitcoin. We've never had euros. We've never had any other political currency. We've just had dollars because there's not been another option. And I have not really desired to have another option. But in light of understanding that the US dollar has had millions of people die at the hand of it, that the dollar has siphoned away billions of collective human years and trillions of hours for the sake of preserving it. And most importantly, the dollar is defended by monopoly on violence. When one begins to look at that and understand, well, maybe I have a responsibility to, at the very least, begin to understand Bitcoin and begin to allocate to it. Maybe I don't fully get it. Maybe I'm still learning, right? But likewise, when a person opens the Bible the first time, they don't understand the whole book, right? They understand one verse, then one chapter, then one book, then all the books, right? And so likewise with Bitcoin, my leaping off question here, Mike, is if somebody's watching this and they have a family, they're probably thinking, in light of this new information, like, where do I even start? Like, how much do I allocate my time, my energy, and my finances to Bitcoin while still going in the right direction, but not overstepping my confidence with it, right? Or even more so, if I'm a pastor watching this, or if I'm a pastor that's been wrestling with this. I hear this all the time with pastors too. I see a good number of pastors at my work at the Bitcoin Advisor, but this is a question these pastors have: is that if I was a pastor and I came to you, Mike, this is what I hear all the time: is that, Mike, I'm a pastor. I've got this church. I'm beginning to see that. I know our children never will escape sin. We're in a sinful, broken world. But in light of now finally the option to exit something that I'm now realizing was a corrupt system to something that's going to be better for the world, and my church can take a monetary stand and say the dollar is the currency of censorship, and we're concerned that we're going to be censored for our beliefs, and we want the uncensorable money. We want number to go up. We want the purchasing power of our church to go up because Bitcoin is going to go up in terms of dollars forever. And most importantly, just like you said, Mike, Bitcoin preserves and respects human life when the dollar doesn't. But Mike, I have this trouble that my church trusts me, the pastor. My church trusts us, the elders. Like, people tithe to our church. And Mike, we don't know where to start because we are stewarding our own resources, God's resources, because all resources are God's, and we're stewarding, of course, the church's resources. So, Mike, for someone that would say, okay, you guys have been talking an hour already, everything sounds wonderful, kind of makes sense, but just practically, I don't want to risk, quote unquote, my family's or my church's savings. And so, Mike, what would you say to that question?
Oh, man. First of all, I would say, man, do I resonate with that person. Oh my gosh, do I understand? Because it took a lot before my wife allowed me to buy Bitcoin. And she wasn't, when I did a lot, like I said, the larger amount of Bitcoin once we sold our rental house, it wasn't like she understood totally what was going on. She just placed her trust in me, and I felt the weight of that. I felt, because even then at that point in time, I was still learning, still growing. In some ways, if you're a Christian listening or a pastor, it's similar. I hate to make this comparison, but it's similar to coming to faith in Christ, where I think if the what's the word, the claim that is being made about Bitcoin right now, that we have just been making here, is substantial. It's big. Okay. And if there's pastors or Christians listening, you probably understand, as you've talked to people and shared the gospel and tried to evangelize in some ways, people often will come to a place where they'll be confronted. Well, how do I make a decision on this? And typically you'll, at least when I'm talking to someone who's in the process of coming to faith, I will mention the fact that, look, it's either like Christianity claims that you're either in hell or in heaven. Like the stakes are huge. And in a sense, with Bitcoin, it's very similar. The stakes are big
in this lifetime.
And so I would, yeah, amen. Yes. Thank you, Luke. Yeah. Yes, that's exactly right. That's a good distinction to make versus the eternal significance. Right. So number one, I would say, because chances are the people you just described have people looking at them, looking up to them. The person who's the pastor or ministry leader or whatever may not know as much about money themselves, and they're just doing what they're told by their board or their committee. And so here's what I would say: you need to educate yourself first. You really need to learn more about Bitcoin. You need to study Bitcoin. Take some time to read some books, to watch some educational videos or documentaries that will help you to better understand it. I remember being, I forget who said it. Someone told me that until you can explain it yourself in some way, you don't really grasp it. And so I still remember to this day sitting down with my wife, like drawing out the decentralized, all the different nodes, and trying to explain to her what Bitcoin was, because I wanted to kind of internalize it just through that. And so I that's the first thing I would do is first learn. There is a learning curve involved. And then if you really want to, I would say buy a little bit of Bitcoin, maybe $50, $100, maybe buy a little bit of Bitcoin, go to riverfinancial.com. That's where I would go. And purchase some Bitcoin there. Typically when you own some, you're more incentivized to learn more about it. So I would encourage someone to do that. But then otherwise, really, it is learning. So again, as a new Christian, start reading the Bible. Just start reading it. Start getting God's word into you. In a similar way, not with the same eternal significance, but learn about Bitcoin. Gosh, I know if someone's listening and they want help or they want a pathway, please reach out to me. I would love to talk to you about it and kind of walk you through it. And I know you would, Luke, and anybody else from Bitcoin is better, I'm sure too. But would love to help you walk through it. But that would be, I guess, my biggest thing is to learn. I
would agree with that, learning. And I think probably the first big step of learning for people considering that is understanding that Bitcoin is not an investment. You buy an investment to make more money, but Bitcoin is money. You don't buy Bitcoin to make more money. Bitcoin is the money. And so let's say
Absolutely.
your church probably has two reserve assets right now. You probably have cash on your balance sheet, and you probably have the church building, right? Let's say the church building's worth $500,000. Let's say the cash your church collectively has is $500,000. You got a church that, in dollar terms, obviously eternally it's infinitely valuable, but in dollar terms, the balance sheet of the church is $1 million, right? Basically, if we think of money as energy, where is the church allocating its energy? The church is putting half of its energy in the building and half of its energy in the U.S. government. Now, there's value to both. There's value to, especially the building of, it's a common place where people can gather. You could celebrate, worship, etc. Everything. And by the way, all this is also true with the family, right? The family is the exact same thing. The family has a home.
Yep, that's right.
The family is basically a smaller church, right? And so the home is basically kind of a smaller church. And so the family has a home on that side of the balance sheet. And then the other side of the balance sheet is probably stocks in the family home, right? And the church is probably more likely cash or cash equivalent or something, right? And so if one begins to, as you recommend, Mike, to learn about Bitcoin and understand Bitcoin is a treasury reserve asset, then you can understand, okay, it's a diversification of where we want our energy to go, right? As Christians, or even people that aren't Christians can relate, is that you diversify your time, right? Some of your time is for giving, some of your time is for saving for the future, and some of your time and energy is for spending, because you need to live, you need to have your kids eat, right? And all those things are worthwhile. All of them can be good. And I think the encouragement, Mike, that you and I would have for fathers and mothers in their home and for pastors and elders in the church would be to view Bitcoin in that way, is to understand what percent of our household or of our church are we willing to allocate to the common place where we live and meet. In the church's case, is the church. In the family's case, the house. What percentage are we willing to allocate towards the government? Because the government does have a use. The government does protect the land which we live on, right? The government does defend the church physically from being invaded from a enemy nation, let's say, or from within, right? Somebody burning it down, right? The police protect it, whatever. So, okay. But I think the big question is, do we really want half of our treasury asset to be defending the government, right? We can support certain things with the government. We can condemn other things with the government. Probably these days we're condemning more than we're supporting. But I think that's the big question parents and pastors really need to ask themselves is, if we have half of our wealth in the church building or in the building we live and half in the liquidity that is the government, do we really want to have a 0% allocation to accelerating a new kind of accounting that is going to value human life, that is going to bring our church more purchasing power, that is going to help our church members buy more of their own time back in the future? I mean, I think it would be a good idea for the congregation of your church in 5, 10, 15 years to be able to have more time to be able to volunteer, to be able to go on missions, right? And so I think all of those things are really big questions. And so what I have seen churches do, this is something I've helped churches do at my work at the Bitcoin Advisor, is we help move some portion of their church's balance sheet into Bitcoin. Maybe that's 1%. Maybe that's 10%. Probably the highest I've ever seen, honestly, is maybe a third, right? And these are small churches, right? And so it's going to be slow. It's going to take time. But my big encouragement for everyone is to get off zero, right? In the same way, it's not healthy to only give and spend but not consume, because you'll starve. Or in the same way, it's not healthy to spend and give but not save. Or in the same way, it's not healthy to save and spend but never give. Like, you need all three. And likewise, with how to steward the resources that God has granted to you, probably it's a good idea to not be at 0%.
Zero.
That's probably not the best stewardship.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I would also just say this too. One of the things that you will, if you do start studying Bitcoin, one of the things that happens, but Christians are familiar with this though. This is why I'm saying this. You gain what's called a low time preference, and so we live in our country often by a high time preference, which is just the now. We want to get what we need to get now. We have to storehouse as much money and resources as we can for us now. We have to get yours now, or else again it's a zero sum game. Somebody else will, and we miss out, right? And obviously, as Christians, when we become a Christian, we put our faith in Christ. Suddenly, our perspective changes, and we've got an eternal perspective. We have a super low time preference, because now our life is but a breath, here and gone. Yet, oddly enough, it also counts for eternity. So it's really interesting, right? So the things we do now are eternally significant. But yet at the same time, we're called to not spend too much time and energy on this life, because it's the life to come we're looking to. So we understand what low time preference means in that sense. We know what it means to have an eternal perspective. Yeah, right. And I would say get ready to apply that same way of thinking with Bitcoin. And you will be blown away. I was, as I started studying Bitcoin, how my high time preference beliefs and actions and attitudes started to show themselves in some ways that I didn't realize. In some ways, as you study Bitcoin and you grow in that, in having a lower time preference, you realize, wow, I was thinking too short term about some things from a financial perspective. And part of that is because of the corrupt nature of our monetary system and its influence on us. Babylon's coming full circle influence on us to try to enslave us, right? So with that in mind, that low time preference, eternal perspective, long horizon, as you're beginning to learn about Bitcoin, just take your time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Dive in, learn, but know that play the long game. They've said it. I've heard it over and over again. Like, it's those who make those small daily buys of Bitcoin, if you want, or weekly or monthly, but on a consistent basis, that do better in the long run with this asset that continues to go up, versus feeling the need to, oh my gosh, I'm feeling so like I need to put as much money as I can into it. I remember feeling that back in 2017, 2018, I think, when it ran up quick to 20,000 or something. And I remember like thinking, oh my gosh, I'm missing out. Like, I just have to put money in there and it's going to go up. Well, I didn't. I'm thankful I didn't, because it went back down to like 3,000, right?
But you didn't buy that?
And then I remember right. I didn't either then, right? Yeah. But and then when it was at 3,000, I remember watching somebody online say, and we're coming up to the halving, and someone said, "Hey, look." I remember watching them on YouTube. I think it was I forget who it was. Anyway, but they said, "Hey, now's the time to put money into it, because it's going to run up pretty good. So just even buy $500 worth." But I didn't know enough about it, and I knew I could sense in myself, if I were to buy this right now, it'd be totally out of greed, with the idea of wanting to engage in that number go up kind of mentality. So we as Christians really need to protect ourselves from that and guard our hearts, as the scripture warns us to do. Do not buy into that fallacy. Take your time, learn. It's not too late. This is honest, just weights. This is honest money, and it's going to have incredibly redemptive benefits for now, for a long time, and we will be able to reap the benefits of that if we put the due diligence in now, and start just sowing seeds at a time, and waiting for the harvest.
I think it's a bigger life thing, but I think as we mature, or at least for me, since I'm still pretty young, as I've matured, I've seen more and more paradoxes in life, right? And so we've already talked about how Christ is our inheritance, but also we are his inheritance, right? We talked about that. We've talked about how money doesn't matter, but it does matter, right? Like, it doesn't matter in God's life, but it does matter.
That's right.
This life, this short life doesn't matter, but it does matter, right? Lots of paradoxes there.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
I think the same thing is true in Bitcoin. We are, Mike, you and I are ridiculous pessimists, because we think the dollar is going to die, and it will die. It will die. At the same time, we're optimists, though, right? And likewise, I think there is a paradox here. The encouragement for everyone watching this is start learning about Bitcoin now, as soon as you can, right? But take your time to learn, right? And I think the same thing, we see in people that are new to the Bible, that are new to Jesus, right? Is that, like, start reading the Bible now, but take time, right? Like, don't read it all in one night and think that now you are qualified to be a pastor. Okay, you're not, right? And it's a similar paradox in all of these aspects. Is the same thing with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is going to $10 million, and that's very optimistic, because people are going to get rich. We're all going to get rich. I'm going to get rich. Mike, you're going to be rich. Everyone's going to be rich. But at the same time, it's a pessimistic statement, because Bitcoin is fire insurance on the US dollar. And the US dollar is a burning house that's going to burn to the ground because it is going to increasingly censor people based on their beliefs. It is going to increasingly debase and dilute. It is going to increasingly accelerate war, famine, and destruction, and economic mayhem all over the world, right? There's optimism and pessimism, all these things. There's an urgency of start learning now, as well as patience and room to breathe for people to take their time. I think all these things are true. And Mike, if it's okay, if I could add on maybe one more perspective, what you were saying about the way churches, I think, should think about it. This is the way I would encourage people to think about this. Let's say, and again, this is true for pastors that are the shepherd to the flock of the church, and this is true for mothers and fathers that are the head of, that are in charge of their children, right? Is that if we think of ourselves as living in the past, right? Like, let's think about us living in Rome. We are having this conversation in Rome. Like, we're not having this conversation online, virtually, in two different spaces. It's slightly different times. And likewise, of course, people watching this are in the future. So we're having this conversation, a two-way conversation with three participants in two different periods of time in three different spaces. So we're not in this weird modern internet world. We are face-to-face having this conversation in ancient Rome. And we were to say, we have this new form of money of 21 million gold coins, right? Rome has invented this magical mint. They've minted 21 million golden coins. They've destroyed the mint, and we're very confident, as long as our understanding of mathematics and physics does not change, we don't know how to make more of these coins. Okay, let's just assume that. Obviously, that's not possible, but we'll say it did happen.
Yeah.
The way I would encourage people to look at it is not that this gold coin is going to make me super, super rich. It will. But I think the better way to think about it is this coin is eventually going to represent 1/21 millionth of all of the economic purchasing power of Rome. That's a lot of money, right? Even more so, it's going to represent all the purchasing power of the world. That's a lot more money. But most importantly,
absolutely,
our church in on the Sea of Galilee or in Italy or Rome, wherever in Rome we are, we're a church, and the early church, right, in the time of Paul, in the time of the early church. I think the real question is, if our church can acquire one of these coins and direct it towards our descendants of this church, what impact will they have on the world, right? What if we can acquire 1/21 millionth of the currency units right now in ancient Rome, and we save that coin, that magical golden coin, for the year 2025, 2,000 years from now,
right?
What is 1/21 millionth of the world's wealth going to look like when those people in the future have all these, magical technologies we can't begin to imagine, right? Now, of course, the balance is that we need the church to survive now to make it to them. But I think that's how people should be looking at Bitcoin right now. When you're buying a certain number of Bitcoins, you're buying a specific fixed percentage of all of them to ever exist. And basically, if you think of it that way, Bitcoin is time traveling energy. You can buy 1/21 millionth of all the barrels of oil that Henry Ford is ever going to have in the year 25 in ancient Rome by buying this magical coin, right? And likewise for us today in the real world having this conversation, we can buy 1/21 millionth of the future technologies of 2050, 2080, 2140, 2200, we don't know how long the world's going to last. It could end tomorrow. It could be another 1,000 years though, right? But and again, that's where we need nuance. We need some to spend, some to save. We need to focus on the church and the family next week, next month, next year, but we also need to be thinking about the next century, right? And so that's what I would encourage people to think about, is that if you want your family, your company, your organization to be able to steward energy in the future, the best way we know how to do that is to preserve it in something that we don't know how to actually technically break because of math and physics, right? Everything else you can break as soon as a corrupt human is in charge of that asset, right? They can take your church, they can take the US dollars, they will take the US dollars. They can take any other physical thing, but we don't know how to take the Bitcoin. So that'd be my reframing encouragement, is that yes, Bitcoin's going to millions of dollars.
It's great.
But also think of it like you're acquiring a percentage of future assets, right? And so one Bitcoin right now, 21 million Bitcoin, decade or two away, there'll be 10 billion people. That is about 500 human beings per Bitcoin. So if you could buy one Bitcoin, that is equivalent to having most likely way more than enough purchasing power of 500 people in the far future. It's equivalent to saying to us in ancient Rome, it's equivalent saying we can buy one of these 21 million magical Roman gold coins and we can have enough purchasing power for 500 people in the year 2025. And what are those people, those descendants of ours, carrying the torch that our church has lit, or that is being carried on? Like, what are they going to do, right? And so that would be the way I'd reframe it. You're buying Bitcoin. You're not buying it. You're not holding Bitcoin as the part of your balance sheet for next week, next month, and next year. You're holding that part of the balance sheet for, your children's children. That is going to be the portion of your balance sheet that's equivalent to Bitcoin. You probably don't want to go all in on Bitcoin, but the part of your balance sheet you want your children's children to have, that part should probably be all in on Bitcoin. That's how I would put it.
That's awesome. Yeah, to think generationally. We don't do that
because we can't in
our culture. Right. Yeah, right. That's exactly right. That's right. We are in bondage to this fiat system, this corrupt fiat system, and it's hindered us in that way. Right. Yeah. We're forced to be so nearsighted. Yeah, that was a great explanation. But let me real quick too. I want to point this out because you mentioned this before. So I am a client of Luke Broyles, and I'm so grateful for what you did for me in setting me up with a multi-sig solution with Unchained and with you guys. And man, I'm really, really grateful that you helped out with that. And I would just say that if anybody else would like to look into this option, that is kind of an advanced solution. I mean, it's never too early to talk to, I think, Luke about setting that up to protect your church if you're looking to buy Bitcoin. But man, you will sleep better at night. You will have the ability to plan for the future, and know that value is safe and secure. And so, thank you, Luke, for that, for the work you did with me and for so many others creating that optionality, man.
Yeah, happy to. Yeah. So for those that don't know what Mike's talking about, I'm the first American, or was the first American, at the company called the Bitcoin Advisor. The Bitcoin Advisor is a Bitcoin service provision company. Been helping clients since 2016. Over $1 billion of Bitcoin has been secured, taken off the exchanges, and locked down for clients. Not a single client has ever lost a single dollar. And the reason we can say that we have a literal 100% success track record is not because I'm perfect. It's actually the opposite of that. I made a lot of mistakes. The beauty with that is that there's no single point of failure in the setup. A big concern for people, especially, again, pastors and parents, is that even if I bought the Bitcoin, I'm worried I might lose it. I'm worried I might lose it, that someone's going to take it from me, steal it. You've heard of it before, right? But the beauty is that if you can take self-custody of the Bitcoin without single points of failure, again, you remove the honeypot, right? So for example, let's Mike use us as examples, right? Myself, Mike, right? For someone to consider multi-sig, whatever, you probably should have at least half of a Bitcoin to really start having it make sense. Probably within a year or two, it's going to be a third of a Bitcoin, right? The incentive, the level goes down as price goes up, right? But my point is that, so, Mike and myself, right? Half a Bitcoin right now is not, life-changing or church-changing wealth, let's say. But in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, that's going to be a massive honeypot, right? All the scammers are going to come after it, right? They might look at your records and say, oh, wow, Mike sold a real estate property in 2023, and we have his Google search history that he was into Bitcoin then. Mike's probably got, we can do the napkin math, whatever. Or likewise, Luke Broyles, we can see his bank financial history, and we can see, basically, again, lesson common in the future and the past. It's like I was just describing a moment ago with the optimism of Rome versus today. Like you're saving these gold coins at ancient Rome with the best technology you have, but all the people 2,000 years from now with technology you can't possibly imagine are going to leverage a technology they have to basically time travel backwards to steal from you, right? And so this is the crazy thing with Bitcoin, that in the same way you can teleport your energy from ancient Rome to the modern day with people with incredible technology. Likewise, people in 2050 are going to be looking back at everyone right now watching this show, talking about Bitcoin, right? Anybody with a couple million sats is going to be a target, because a couple million sats will be a lot. And so anyway, my whole point is that it's really important to, in the same way, why does Bitcoin work? Bitcoin works because there's no single point of failure within the network. And political currency, the US dollar, has single points of failure. We call it a central bank or the Federal Reserve. That's a single point of failure. In the same way, you don't want to have single points of failure in your custody setup, right? So if you have a church, let's say, and your church adopts Bitcoin, you don't want the pastor holding all the keys, because number one, we're assuming the pastor has correct moral virtue for the rest of his life, which we hope he does, right? The church obviously entrusted with that, but that's not guaranteed, especially as Bitcoin price goes up exponentially.
Right.
Number two, we have to hope and assume that the government is not going to knock on his door and take the Bitcoin from him, or more likely, some criminal, some scammer, or some person looking to harm the church, right? You don't want any one single point of failure in your custody setup, right? You don't want to have your whole family, in my view, in my opinion, you don't want to have your whole family's net worth backed by just a single 12-word seed phrase that the dad has memorized. Because what happens if the dad has an accident, loses his memory? Or what happens if the house burns down and you lose your seed phrase? Or what happens if, there's so many, there's an infinite number of ways to lose it. And, people might try to solve some of those problems, and they do successfully, right? You might solve any one hole, but ultimately the only way to solve all of the single points of failure is to have a self-custody solution where there is no single point of failure. Otherwise, you're basically playing whack-a-mole. You have different trade-offs, right? That, I'm going to have 3 Bitcoin for my family or my church. I'm going to put it all on one single sig. Well, now the problem is that's one big honeypot. Well, I have 3 single sigs, each with 1 Bitcoin. But now, again, whack-a-mole, I have lowered the probability of somebody stealing all of my Bitcoin, but I've increased the probability I'm going to lose some of it because of more complexity, right? And so anyway, so rambling point, that's what we do at the Bitcoin Advisor. More than happy to help. Obviously, it's not free, but my average client increases their Bitcoin stock by over 50% within the first 12 months. So very proud of that. Because basically it's not a product one and done. It's an ongoing service where if you're somebody that's newer to Bitcoin, we help you better understand Bitcoin and buy more Bitcoin safely and protect it. If you've been in Bitcoin a while, the whole point is make sure that you're optimizing everything, making sure that you're good to save that Bitcoin for as long as possible. So anyway, Mike, thank you for bringing it up.
Huge, big service.
That was nice.
Yeah,
I don't really
absolutely.
Have more to say,
No, I think that was great, man. And you mentioned the future too. Bitcoin is money, but it's also kind of a there's so many analogies. Let's just put it this way. I've heard Mark Moss say this, that Bitcoin is like the building blocks in a sense that we've been given, and we don't know yet what's going to be built in the future.
Right.
But we're going to be able to provide our future generations, with these building blocks, which would be tremendously valuable to build for redemptive purposes.
Yep.
Hopefully.
Yeah, so. I encourage everyone watching us, steward some of your time to live for today. Tomorrow's never guaranteed. Steward some of your time to save for your children's children, and steward some of your time to raise up your children right. Because if you raise up your kids wrong, it doesn't matter if you save them any money, right? So anyway, do all of those things. Man cannot live on bread alone. Man cannot live on Bitcoin alone. Man is not saved on Bitcoin alone. But Bitcoin is a really good tool that if you have none of it, probably should get some. So anyway, just in case. Yeah, just in case, right? It is good. It might catch on. It's good insurance protection against your church being or your family being censored. It's good protection against the dollar being debased. And most importantly, it's going to help you preserve purchasing power from today towards the future, because it is a plumb line. It is honest weight and measures. Yeah,
it's right. That's right, brother.
Mike, thank you for joining. Hopefully this was interesting to people and people appreciate it. If you did appreciate it,
Yeah.
Like, subscribe, do all the wonderful stuff. Stay tuned for more videos. We got a lot more coming out. Check out Mike's channel. Please check out Bitcoin is Better, bitcoinisbetter.org. Please check out the Bitcoin Advisor. You can find me, Luke Broyles, at the Bitcoin Advisor. Reach out to Bitcoin Advisor, ask for me, or information's on the screen, in the description, whatever. All of those things, please check them out. And Godspeed, everybody. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Luke. Great to be with you,
appreciate it.
brother.